People will remember the first time they saw an Aurora. And you'll be one of the lucky ones who can say that when Aurora was ready to go, so were you. See what happens when you demand better? Aurora by Oldsmobile.
In 1994, Oldsmobile built a car that broke a testing machine. Literally. It was so strong that GM's crash rig couldn't handle it. They had to bring in equipment meant for testing pickup trucks. It had a V8 borrowed from Cadillac, styling unlike anything else on the road, and it was supposed to save one of America's oldest car brands from irrelevance. It didn't. This is the story of the Oldsmobile Aurora, the car that was too good, too late for a brand that was already running out of road. By the late 1980s, Oldsmobile had a problem. Its lineup was old, its buyers were older, and its, quote, "not your father's Oldsmobile" ad campaign was basically begging younger people to notice it existed. Sales were sliding, and GM needed something dramatic to prove Oldsmobile could still build a genuinely exciting car. That something started as a sketch. In the autumn of 1988, designer Maurice "Bud" Chandler drew the first lines of what would become the Aurora. It got a green light to move forward in mid-1989, developed alongside a new two-door sibling, the Buick Riviera. But this project would not have a smooth road to production. GM was in serious financial trouble in the early 90s, and the Aurora paid the price. Engineering work was suspended for a full year starting in January 1990 just to save money. Barely 2 years later, in early 1992, spending was frozen yet again, this time for 6 months, delaying tooling work. The project survived mostly because of one man, Oldsmobile chief John Rock, who fought to keep it alive and won approval from GM's North America Strategy Board in September 1992. Right as rumors were already swirling that GM might kill the entire Oldsmobile division. Pilot production finally began at the Lake Orion, Michigan plant in August of 1993, and the first Auroras started arriving at dealerships in the spring of 1994. When the Aurora finally launched for the 1995 model year, it didn't look, feel, or drive like anything else Oldsmobile had ever built. Gone were the boxy, formal lines of the 98. In their place, smooth, organic curves, narrow wraparound headlights, and, notably, no Oldsmobile badge anywhere on the exterior. GM wanted this car to stand entirely on its own. Under the hood was the Aurora's biggest flex, the L47, a 4-liter dual overhead cam V8 putting out 250 horsepower, engineered from the same architecture as Cadillac's Northstar engine. This was Oldsmobile's first V8-powered flagship in years, mounted transversely and driving the front wheels, paired to a 4-speed automatic. Front-wheel drive V8 sedans are almost unheard of today, but several GM full-size cars of this era shared that unusual layout. Inside, it was loaded. Dual-zone climate control, leather, real burl walnut trim, an 8-way power driver's seat, and a dash-mounted trip computer. Oldsmobile also claimed a genuine first. In 1995, the Aurora became the first American car offered with an onboard navigation system, years before that tech was common. And then there was the structural rigidity. GM's own crush testing equipment couldn't handle the Aurora's unibody chassis. Engineers had to switch to a frame crusher normally reserved for truck frames, and the car still exceeded federal safety standards, with the roof structure withstanding more than 8,000 pounds of force in crush resistance testing. Critics loved the street car. The Aurora was praised for its build quality, its ride, and an engine that felt genuinely premium. It was chosen as the pace car for the Indianapolis 500 in both 1997 and 2000, a serious honor for a brand that hadn't felt cutting edge in decades. Sales in that first year were strong, nearly 46,000 units in 1995. But the most interesting chapter of the Aurora's early life wasn't happening on dealer lots at all. It was happening on racetracks, and it started, fittingly, with the car's own design. Remember Bud Chandler, the designer behind the Aurora's shape? He deliberately designed the car without a conventional front grille, chasing better aerodynamics by feeding cooling air through the lower openings instead. Inside GM, that unusual, almost slippery nose earned the Aurora an internal nickname that stuck: the Tube Car. The nickname turned out to be more literal than anyone expected. When GM decided to take the Aurora racing in 1995, engineers threw out the production unibody entirely. In its place went a purpose-built chromoly steel tube frame chassis, a real, from-scratch race car underneath Aurora-inspired bodywork. This became the Aurora GTS-1. The Aurora showroom V8 made 250 horsepower. The GTS-1's race prep version of that same North Star-based engine, with a high-flow intake, higher compression, and billet internals, was putting out roughly 600 horsepower, mounted longitudinally instead of the street car's transverse layout. An engine that critics considered merely adequate in a luxury sedan was suddenly competitive with Ferraris and Porsches. And it delivered. Run by Bricks Racing, the Aurora GTS-1 took pole position at the 24 Hours of Daytona in its very first season in 1996, then went on to win its class at the 12 Hours of Sebring in both 1996 and 1997, beating factory-backed Mustangs, Camaros, and genuine European sports cars in the process. Not bad for a, quote, lumbering front-wheel drive luxury sedan wearing a fake grille for aerodynamics. The Aurora name found an even bigger stage in 1997. That year, the newly formed Indy Racing League needed a fresh, standardized engine formula, and GM stepped in with a purpose-built, normally aspirated 4.0-liter V8 branded the Oldsmobile Aurora Indy V8. This wasn't the tube-frame GTS-1 engine, and it wasn't the street car's engine either. It was a dedicated racing unit sharing the Aurora's name and displacement, built specifically to Indy Racing League rules. Naturally aspirated, running on methanol, rev limited to 10,500 RPM, and producing somewhere between 675 and 700 horsepower depending on the tune. GM priced the engine at roughly $75,000 per unit, and it was made available to any of the league's approved chassis builders, Dallara, G-Force, and later Riley and Scott. The partnership paid off almost immediately. In just its first season, an Oldsmobile Aurora-powered G-Force GFO1 chassis won the 1997 Indianapolis 500 with Arie Luyendyk behind the wheel, a huge motorsports win for a brand whose showroom cars were being cross-shopped against Buicks. The Aurora Indy V8 went on to power the Indy Racing League's field for several seasons, becoming the dominant engine of the league's early, quote, stock block era, before GM eventually shifted its racing focus towards Cadillac's North Star badge programs, including a twin-turbocharged version of the same basic architecture that competed in the Le Mans prototype class starting in 2000. For a car that struggled to find its footing with everyday buyers, the Aurora's racing legacy, from a tube-frame GT car nicknamed after its own designer's aero trick to an Indy 500 winning open-wheel engine, is arguably more impressive than anything it did on a showroom floor. Sales in that first road car year were still strong, nearly 46,000 units in 1995. But there was a catch. The Aurora launched with a base price of $34,360. GM had reportedly benchmarked it against the Mercedes-Benz E320, which started around $43,500. So on paper, the Aurora looked like a bargain. But cross-shoppers weren't comparing it to a Mercedes. They were comparing it to cars like the Acura TL, which started nearly $4,500 cheaper. For a brand that buyers still associated with their grandparents, that price gap was hard to justify. No matter how good the car actually was, sales fell off a cliff after the launch year, down to about 22,000 units in 1996, and by 1999, fewer than 19,000 Auroras found buyers in the Aurora's final year of that first generation. Production of that first-generation Aurora ended in June 1999. Notably, there was no 2000 model year at all for the Aurora, a 2-year model gap before Oldsmobile tried again. The second-generation Aurora entered production in November 1999 and hit showrooms in February 2000 as a 2001 model, about 6 inches shorter than the original and built to share more components across GM's full-size lineup. This time, Oldsmobile added a more affordable option, a 3.5-liter V6, nicknamed the Short Star by owners since it was derived from the same North Star base family as the V8. It was the first time a 6-cylinder engine had ever been offered in an Aurora, positioning it to absorb buyers from the outgoing 88 and LSS models. Critics were split. Automobile magazine felt the new design wasn't quite as elegant as the original. Other reviewers argued the second-generation car was actually better in nearly every measurable way. Either way, it no longer felt like the one-of-a-kind flagship the first Aurora had been. It now shared visible design language with other Oldsmobiles instead of standing apart from them, and the timing could not have been worse. In December 2000, just months after the redesigned Aurora arrived, General Motors announced it was shutting down the Oldsmobile division entirely. It was the end of the oldest surviving car brand in America, founded by Ransom E. Olds back in 1897. The Aurora limped on anyway. V6 production ended in June 2002. The V8 held on until March 2003, when Oldsmobile built a final symbolic run. 500 special Final 500 Auroras, finished exclusively in a dark cherry metallic paint with unique chrome wheels and badging. Total second-generation production came to roughly 71,700 cars across just 3 model years, a fraction of what the original had managed in its first year alone. Oldsmobile as a brand would build its very last car, an Alero sedan, in 2004, bringing a 107-year history to a close. Today, the Aurora is a strange kind of automotive footnote, a genuinely excellent, over-engineered flagship that arrived at exactly the wrong moment for a company that was already dying. It even picked up a bit of pop culture immortality. The character Bob Cutlass in Pixar's Cars is modeled on a 1999 Aurora, and a 2001 model appears in a memorable chase scene in The Matrix Reloaded. For collectors today, the Aurora remains an underrated piece of GM history, a reminder that sometimes the car isn't the problem, the brand around it is.